Hey friends, I want to talk about the art of telling your own life story. And as you may know, in my podcast, the first question that I ask my guests is, tell me about your life story. What's happened so far? And there's an art to this. There's an art to telling a story in general, to storytelling. That's an art. And then there's an art to telling the story of your own life in particular, which is autobiography, right? Memoir. And of course, in the context of my podcast and any conversation you were to have where this question would come up, it's a verbal answer. You are telling the story verbally through speaking. And that's different than writing memoir, for example, or an autobiographical essay or something like that. Related, but different. And just knowing that there's an art to this is important. That's half the battle, because sometimes, basically, if you don't know there's an art to it, then I've noticed there's two common tendencies for people with my podcast, where either they'll tell me their life story in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's like, well, I was born here, and then this happened, and then this other thing happened. I went to this college, I went to work, and I got married, and now I do this thing. There's my story. And that's the way some people think of their own lives. Certain adults, often these are people who really identify with their current project, who, I don't know, maybe they don't take their own character or that life that seriously, or maybe they feel vulnerable to share or to take up too much space. I don't know. There could be any number of reasons. But that's, I don't know, it's honestly kind of dissatisfying. It's like a blurb of that you'd read before a conference speaker speaks or something. It's like, that's not really what I'm asking for. And the other one that's a bit more satisfying, but also maybe suboptimal, is if someone takes 15, 20, 30 minutes to recount strictly chronologically what happened in their life. And, that can be done with more or less art, so that can still be quite good. And there's a reason that chronological is the default. In any case, well, I was born here, my parents were like this such and such happened when I was a kid, then I went to high school, then I went to college, then I went to work, now I got married, whatever. It's basically the same first thing, but at a bit more length. There's a reason that chronological is the default. It sort of makes sense. It has an order, it has a coherence to it. It's pretty easy relatively. That said, whether you do it chronologically or not, it feels like there's so much left on the table. Like there's such heights to this art of telling a story, and people often just miss that that's possible. And I don't know, if you think about a really, really, really good life story, or just a really good story in general, probably you've heard someone tell a really good bedtime story, or just a really good story over dinner, where they take 5, 10, 15 minutes even to tell a story, and you're just captivated. You're like, wow, that's the whole way through. You're like, wait, what? And oh my goodness. And there's interest and intrigue and surprise and ups and downs. And, as I say, that takes art. So it takes skill to some extent. It takes practice and also inspiration. And it matters in this context how you've lived your life also. Maybe more or less has happened to different people subjectively. I've lived a pretty full life at this point at 34, and I could tell a whole story about that. But, if you were born in a rural town and not much happened there, and you never left, and, basically just a series of things happened to you that weren't that eventful, okay, maybe it's harder to tell your life story artfully. But I don't know, I like to think everyone's life has a lot of depth to it and a lot of meaning, like layers and layers of meaning, and that we deserve that. Like, we deserve to connect to our own life story in a way that honors that meaning and honors that depth that's there. And I think it's worth telling the story in that way. And granted, it's tricky to do so because, I don't know, what do you feel like sharing? What do you feel like being vulnerable about? Whether it's in private or in public. In the case of my podcast, it's a recorded conversation. It's one-to-many, so like you don't really know who's listening. So the way you tell that story is going to be different than the way you might tell your life story to a really close friend or a dinner party of close friends or something like that. That said, even if you don't share the whole story, even if you redact major portions of it, there's still the possibility of art, of really telling the story in a beautiful way, in a compelling way, in a way that honors and really glorifies even the beauty and artistry of your own life and everything that you've been through, and validates your own experience to you and communicates that to someone else. It's like, hey, I was here, I did this thing, I had this experience, I felt this way. And I think the bottom line here, there's probably more I'll learn to say over time, but it's just that this takes practice. And it's worth practicing telling your own story, partly so you can tell it beautifully, of course, but I think the way that we relate to our concept of ourself and the story that we tell about who we are and what we've been through really, really matters for the way we orient towards ourselves and other people in the world. And we also give people something to connect to and understand and relate to and make decisions about. Oh, you're such and such a person who's been through such and such a thing. And it's worth crafting that story well. And we do that through practice, through telling people our story. Now, it might take a long time to tell your whole life story, especially as you get older, but every time you get to tell a story from your life, you're practicing the larger thing, and you're practicing storytelling in general. So even just telling a story of something small that happened to you recently to a friend at a dinner party or whatever it is, or on the phone, that's an opportunity to practice telling the story of your life. And it's worth doing this. And partly actually for self-coherence. There's a Captain Mrs. tweet I love that says, like, I'm paraphrasing here, but like, telling your story of your life is one of the best ways to come into coherence with yourself. And it's sort of an underrated way to come into coherence with yourself of who am I and what am I doing here and what's happened to me. And just that activity itself is almost like therapeutic. It's cohering, it's harmonizing, it's integrating, where you say, yeah, I am such and such a person. I went through this experience, and things that were painful or confusing in the past kind of get rearranged where they fit together in this larger picture just by this act of looking back and communicating, this is what's happened to me. So powerful, so powerful. And it's really an honor and a privilege to listen to someone's story for this reason, to give them the space to have this opportunity for self-coherence in this way. But it's also powerful socially and interpersonally, such that we are communicating to other people, here is who I am. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what I'm here to do. This is what I've been through. These are the challenges I've faced. These are the successes I've had. And this is what you need to know about who I am, such that you can interface with me, such that you can make choices about how you want to be connected to me, how you want to be related to me, whether you want to live your life with me, whether you want to weave our lives together, whether you want to collaborate together, whether you want to be friends. All of that is communicated implicitly and explicitly through this act of saying who we are, saying what our life story is. So I think it's just incredibly important, and it's underrated because people don't know that there's art to this. People treat it very matter of fact, very factually, very, I don't know, blandly almost. It's like, well, almost like a resume. It's frustrating to me because I don't want to read a resume. I want to hear a story about your life. I want to be engaged. I want to be, entertained, but also immersed in the vividness of who you are as a person. I want to see your character reflected through your choices, through the challenges you faced. I want to get a glimpse into what it's like to be you and what you've seen and what you've done and the choices you've made. I want to receive that. I want to let that arise in my being and get a window into a different life and who you are, and see you anew through this lens. Oftentimes we just get sort of surface or superficial impressions of who someone is from the things they say or the way we encounter them. And then when we realize, oh, you went through this kind of a childhood, or you made such and such a decision 5 years ago, I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea, or maybe I glimpsed a little bit of that, but hearing the way you talk about it also, that matters so much. It's not just the mere facts of what's happened to you, but the sense that you make of what's happened to you, the way that you speak about it, the way you relate to it, the metaphors you use, the feelings, the facial expressions, the body language, all of that conveys such texture and vividness about, this is what it's like to be this person. Now I know. And how to put it, each of us has our own life experience, has been through what we've been through, but there are so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of life and living situations that we ourselves have not experienced in our life. And it's a bridge to another kind of world, another kind of heart, to know, oh, this is what it was like to be this person. And the world gets bigger when we get that glimpse of, oh, this is a different way of life that someone else has been through. And we see the world differently. We see other people differently. We understand people differently. We understand them better. We can make better choices about how to relate to people when we realize, oh, for example, here's a simple example. Like, you can look at the world in terms of economic class or something, and that can be a hammer that you always hit a nail with. But say you grew up middle class like I did, then you're like, you know what it's like to be middle class, but you don't know what it's like to be poor. You don't know what it's like to be rich. This is oversimplification, but bear with me here. If I hear the life story of someone who was rich or someone who was really, really poor, who had a hard time having food on the table, their parents couldn't feed them or couldn't house them or something, then I'm going to get a glimpse into what it was like to be really poor or be really rich in a way that I wouldn't have experienced myself. And actually hearing someone's report, their story of what it was like to be them in that experience, makes the world more vivid, makes it more complex, makes it expand in sense of what's possible and what it's like to be a human in different situations. And it gives us more compassion and more empathy of, oh yeah, if I was in that situation, probably I would have felt that way too. And that deepens the possibility to connect with other people, to really, really understand what it's like to be them, and to orient towards, oh, it's possible to live like this. It's possible to have these situations. And I just gave a really simple example of economic class, but this applies to everything, every dimension of life. There's more complexity and more nuance and more mystery, more vastness than our limited minds can ordinarily conceive of. And so hearing someone's life story, especially if it's beautifully told, if it's well told, if it's told in this artful, caring, human, compassionate, empathetic way that honors that person's life, then that just dramatically expands our sense of what the world is and what it means to be a human heart, what it means to be alive, and just makes the world so much richer. So I think it's worth practicing this art. It's worth practicing telling your story of your life, and it's worth getting good at it. It's worth developing artistry and beauty in it. And I hope, honestly, that my podcast is in service of that, amongst other things, that it gives people this opportunity to practice this. And I hope that we all practice it in our conversations, in our interactions, not just in this recorded podcast format, but when we're at a party, when we're with new people, when we're with old friends, that we practice sharing, this is who I am, this is what I've been through, this is what I've seen, this is what I've learned, and that we tell that not only with care and consideration, but with art and love and beauty. So I'd be curious to hear what you think about this. This is how I think about the art of telling one's life story. If you have any thoughts, feel free to put them in the comments. In the meantime, sending you love.